Skaven used to be home to the Dwarden, but the pests, they've moved in. There used to be echoes of laughter, drinking, and work from the glorious anvil. Now all we hear are screeches and destruction. Aye, the Skaven, they've built a new home.
Hello folks, welcome to Dice Chatter. My name is Donnie and today I will be giving you a basic rundown on how I created some Skaven inspired terrain. This is my first terrain build on the channel and it has definitely been a long time coming. Hopefully you folks enjoy it so I can do more of these in the future. Anyways, let me take you on a little journey into the deep where the Skaven are building an empire. So as you can see, I have some basic plans. I essentially want to create a series of different sized stalagmites and wrap makeshift wooden scaffolding around them. And to make it a little bit more Skaven, I have some extra bits I can throw on and do some etching into the stone to show off that Skaven symbol. Doing a build like this one, you will need materials, supplies, and a little know-how. The main supplies you need to copy this build are insulation foam, expanding foam, drywall compound, and a bunch of popsicle sticks. And I mean a lot of popsicle sticks. Alright, well enough dilly-dally, let's jump right in. And of course, right off the bat, I screw up. And not with laying out some parchment paper, it is with the expanding foam. You see, this foam is great for filling in cracks and making rocks, but they don't look much like tall stalagmites. Now I want those rocks to be large and imposing, not flat and hill-like. But I will save these and use them for another project. With mishaps, it leads to another trip to Home Depot and a better plan. The expanding foam is still the way to go with this project, but you have to create a frame for the foam to settle on. So I had some 2-inch thick insulation foam lying around and created a makeshift frame. After 2 cans of expanding foam, I was able to fill up 2.5 big old rocks. And of course, I ran out of more foam again, so I'll just be messing around with 2 rocks for this build. I decided to let the foam harden up for about a day, and in the meantime I needed to work on the ramshackled scaffold that will be attached to the rocks. This popsicle shaving, cutting, grinding, and sanding process, well, was a drag. This repetitive work was really boring. It took a long while to cut up a bunch of sticks, and just keep in mind when building tabletop terrain, it is these repetitive steps that generally are always worth it. Your weak little hands may hurt after a little while, but in the end you'll have an awesome looking foam rock to sit on a table where you move plastic mini men and women around to wage pretend war. This is the point when you decide that learning that second language or picking up a different hobby may be better worth your time. But then you realize that doesn't sound like fun either. Alright, I am way off track now. After lots of sticks have been ramshackled, I move back over to the rocks and start turning them into, well, rocks. The expanding foam has done its job, but you have to take those weird looking bubbles and bulges by carving them into more realistic shapes. The best part about this step is that you don't have to be perfect. Rocks, just like you, are not perfect. Don't get frustrated if you take too much foam off with a cut. Make a gash in the foam a little too big, or just ignore an area entirely. It's a rock. You aren't attempting to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Also, I'd suggest work in an area not like me that is easy to clean up. I would have worked in my garage at the time of filming this project, but I didn't feel like working in below freezing temperatures with a knife. Once you are pretty happy with your foam rocks, you have to adhere them to something. I had some hardboard lying around the house that I measured off and then cut to generally fit the rock. I suggest not cutting the shape to perfectly fit the rock here. You will need a little extra space in future steps to add in more detail and, just give yourself a little bit more room. After this easy step, you move on to one of my favorite parts of the build, getting your hands covered in goop. Here we start taking our drywall compound and slapping it all over the foam. I feel as if I am back in elementary school art class again, with my same intelligence and work ethic, dumb and messy. The spackle does a few things for us here. For starters, it turns your crappy carving into a half-decent textured piece. Lots of bumps, ridges, and intricacies for your paint to find purchase in later steps. The second thing the drywall compound does is add a needed layer of durability. This is a tabletop gaming piece of terrain. It is going to get thrown around, bumped into, smacked, and maybe even thrown by an angry opponent. You want this thing to last. And the third thing the spackle does is add weight to the project. There are numerous times when I'm playing a game and the terrain gets moved or bumped by an unexpected hairy arms or sweaty hands. At some point, I was relatively happy with how my masterpiece had turned out and moved on to more popsicle sticks. For the wood, I did not feel like painting every single cut, bend, and broken piece of wood, so I decided to try out some wood stains I had lying around the house. I would essentially just take a piece of wood, drop it in all haphazardly, and mix it about. I would make sure to give all the sticks different shades of brown and gray. It gives it the illusion that some wood is more rotten and broken down than others. I think it comes off decently well taking the shortcut here to stain the wood rather than paint it. In the end, I saved probably hours upon hours of work. I'm a big proponent of taking a shortcut here and there if it saves you a step or two that you definitely do not want to tackle. Now, this may take the quality of your project down a wee bit, so you have to be aware of that sacrifice. Alright, while that soaks into the wood and dries off, we go back to our hardened stone. Because I have to put some massive globs of drywall compound in sections, some massive cracks showed up near the base. With a project like this though, I would consider this not that big of a deal. Now I plan to spray paint this guy, so I want to give my rock one more step of protection. The famous Black Magic Craft Mod Podge coat. If you all don't know about this by now, it's a black paint mixed with Mod Podge, and you just slop it all over everything. So, as you can see, that is exactly what I did here. After all that dried, I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the base the rock was resting on and to the stone itself. To do this, I put some watered down PVA glue on sections where I wanted to add some pizzazz, and then I threw on some mixed sand and stones in that glue water mixture. I ended up doing this all around the base and over a number of sections of the rock. And to even add more protection, when all that glue and sand dried, I made sure to add more watered down PVA over the sand and rocks that had dried. Once that was complete, off camera, I ran outside, spray painted these big guys black, and began the painting process. When painting massive terrain like this, I use two main items. The first is a super crappy, cheap acrylic paint. This time I may try and throw some inks on as well. And of course, some dollar store makeup brushes. These brushes do a really great job when you have to dry brush the crap out of a project. And dry brush we did. For the stone, we did our typical darkest to lightest gray coloration on the stone. Heavier dry brushing at the start and less when it comes to the lighter colors. Make sure to focus those darker grays in any recesses of the stone and take that lighter gray and white and put it on the high points. Over time, your rock will start to look like a big old gray mass, and in my humble opinion, that is boring. To counteract this problem, I added a few other colors into the mix. Some tan, brown, and eventually a little green from an ink I will mess with in just a second here. Rocks and stones tend to not just be a single shade of color. Feel free to go crazy and mix in all kinds of colors to your model. Alright, for inks, it is good to note that you may want to let all your crappy acrylic paint dry before you start this step. Otherwise, you're going to peel off some paint. I did this a tiny bit, but I did cover it up to an appropriate standard. I also learned that the inks are very vibrant. If that is what you are going for, well then great. In this case, that was not the look I was going for and had to water the vibrant green and add a touch of brown to dull it down. After messing around with this for a minute, I like my end product and how it seems that the green is oozing and growing on certain sections of the rocks. Overall, I am very happy with this paint job. It is no Picasso piece, but it looks decent to me. With the painting done, we now move on to the part where all my work could go down the toilet by attaching and stabbing popsicle sticks into my nicely painted foam rock. Not gonna lie, I was a little nervous and very apprehensive to start this step, but I figured, why not just give it a shot? I did a little test on the rock I didn't have enough foam for. I just took some sticks and started stabbing them into the foam. Simple as that. The idea's there, let's just see if I can feasibly execute it on the real deal. The first thing I wanted to do here is plan out a couple sections and glue them together. These sections would be used as placeholders and give me a general idea on how these rats moved up and down this janky scaffold. I wanted a lot of it to not connect well, almost giving off the vibe that construction was quick and that a lot of the original plans have been smashed to pieces just after a few uses. And then the stabbing commenced all over the rocks. Occasionally I had to use a hobby knife to carve away at sections with sand and stones, but anything with foam, a sharp popsicle stick slid in great. I also made sure to use some PVA to attach these segments to the rocks, and I used super glue to attach the sticks together. I had a bunch of super glue lying around, so I figured I'd put it to good use. This process took a long while. I wanted sections of the scaffold to actually be usable in-game if a weary hero wanted to scale the rock, and other spots I wanted to create blockades or just have it randomly placed to fill in some open space. There was a general method to my madness here, but this is meant to be built by the chaotic forces of the Skaven, so it can be pretty haphazardly placed. Once I had the wood all laid out and stabbed into the foam, the project needed a little bit more, something to just add a little bit more detail. I figured I'd add some ropes here and there to give off the illusion that some of the scaffold is being held up by these thin ropes. I found some super thin, sturdy twine in my hobby bin and went to town gluing it down and attaching it to the wood and rock. I even used paper clips and bent them into a U to have them be a nice attach points to the rock. I didn't add too much rope over the rocks, but I feel I added enough to add that little extra speck of detail. And for my final big detail piece, I wanted to make a crappy flag with the Skaven symbol painted on it, so I grabbed some tissue and laid it out over the scaffold I had set up. Once I liked the shape, I slammed it into a watery glue mixture and carefully spread it out over the wood. While that dried, I needed a little inspiration, so I pulled out my old Clan Pestilence battle tome and looked at some banner imagery. So with that in mind, once that dried, I took out some washes and paints and created a really crappy looking banner. And for you folks trying this at home, when you put wet paint on something that was once wet tissue, it rehydrates again. I probably should have thought of this, so just be a little careful if you're doing this while you paint. So there you have it, folks, my attempt at some Skaven-inspired terrain. Overall, I am happy with the rocks I have made here. They have character, the details are a nice touch, and I feel the colors work out well. At the end of the day, they will make some great wargaming terrain and go well on a filled out table. As this is my first terrain build on the channel, I feel like I did a pretty decent job, and I hope you all agree too. Building and filming the terrain process is a long and tedious one, but very enjoyable. If you all would like to see more, throw me some ideas, and of course, let me know. I want to thank you all for watching, and of course, happy gaming.